Everything that appears solid, tangible, and real is only a surface expression of something far more fundamental. The objects touched, the air breathed, the very body itself. These are not as they seem. Beneath this physical reality, an invisible framework exists, one that dictates the behavior of everything in existence. This underlying structure is not made of individual particles or isolated objects, but of continuous, ever-present fields, quantum fields that ripple, interact, and give rise to all matter and energy. Quantum field theory stands as the most precise and comprehensive framework for understanding the universe at its most fundamental level. Unlike classical physics, which depicts reality as composed of solid particles moving through empty space, quantum field theory reveals that space itself is not empty. Every point in space contains fluctuations, disturbances in underlying fields that stretch across the entire universe. These fields are not separate from one another but are intertwined, influencing each other in ways that defy conventional logic. A single particle does not exist independently. Instead, it is a localized excitation of a field, a ripple that emerges from the continuous background of quantum fluctuations. The electron, for example, is not a tiny, solid sphere orbiting an atomic nucleus. It is a disturbance in the electron field, a region of space where energy condenses into a measurable form. Even the vacuum, which appears to be completely empty, is alive with activity. Virtual particles arise and vanish in an instant, borrowing energy from the void and disappearing before their presence can be directly recorded. This is not a theoretical speculation. It has been repeatedly confirmed through experiments that detect the subtle effects of these fleeting, ghost-like entities. Particles are not fundamental. Fields are. Every known force, every piece of matter, every burst of energy, these are all different manifestations of quantum fields. Even light itself, moving at extraordinary speeds across the cosmos, is nothing more than oscillations in the electromagnetic field. The very fabric of reality is a dynamic, interconnected ocean of vibrations, where nothing is truly separate from anything else. Experiments have pushed the boundaries of what can be measured and observed, revealing behaviors that defy common sense. A single electron, when left unobserved, does not exist as a single, definite point. It exists as a probability wave, spread across space, only taking on a precise location when it is measured. This wave-like nature is not limited to electrons. Protons, neutrons, even entire atoms, when subjected to quantum experiments, display the same behavior. Reality does not behave in a fixed, predictable manner at its most fundamental level. Instead, it operates in terms of probabilities, possibilities, and interactions that transcend the limitations of classical understanding. The famous words of Albert Einstein still echo through scientific discussions. He referred to quantum entanglement as spooky action at a distance, a phenomenon so bizarre that it seemed to violate the very principles of space and time. Two particles, once connected, remain linked no matter how far apart they are. A change in the state of one instantaneously affects the other, as if an invisible thread exists between them. This connection operates faster than the speed of light, suggesting that information can travel instantaneously across vast distances. At the heart of this mystery lies a question that science is still struggling to answer. If particles can be linked beyond the constraints of space and time, then what is the true nature of the fabric that binds them? Is there a deeper layer of reality where all things are connected, not just physically but fundamentally? This question leads to a profound realization. The universe may not be composed of isolated objects interacting through empty space. Instead, it may be an interconnected whole, where everything exists as part of a single, unified field. The implications of this understanding extend far beyond physics. They touch upon the very nature of existence, of perception, and of consciousness itself. Moving further into these mysteries, one discovery continues to challenge scientific understanding: the fact that observation itself seems to play a role in shaping reality. This is not merely a philosophical question, it is an experimental fact. When a quantum system is not being observed, it exists in multiple states simultaneously, a condition known as superposition. But the moment it is measured, it chooses a definite state. This phenomenon raises an unsettling question. Does the act of observation influence the physical world in ways not yet fully understood? Every step deeper into quantum reality reveals more questions than answers. The more closely reality is examined, the more elusive and intangible it becomes. There is no solid ground, no fixed structure beneath the visible world. Instead, there is only a vast, interconnected field of potential, waiting to be observed, waiting to take form. The mysteries of quantum field theory are not mere abstract concepts confined to laboratories. They suggest something much more profound, that reality is not as rigid and mechanical as once believed. Instead, it is fluid, interconnected, and perhaps even responsive to consciousness itself. As this journey continues, the next revelation pushes the boundaries even further. The fundamental nature of observation itself comes into question. The next step is to explore the quantum paradoxes that emerge when reality refuses to behave in predictable ways, leading to discoveries that may hold the key to understanding the very essence of consciousness. Quantum paradoxes and the observer effect. The world that is seen and experienced daily appears stable, predictable, and governed by well-defined rules. A chair remains a chair. A tree remains a tree. Objects exist whether they are being looked at or not. This assumption, the belief that reality is independent of observation, has shaped human understanding for centuries. But in the quantum world, the very act of looking at something changes it. The mere presence of an observer alters reality itself. This idea is not speculation or philosophical pondering. It is an experimental fact. A series of groundbreaking discoveries has shown that the tiniest particles in existence do not behave in a fixed, predetermined way. Instead, they exist in multiple states at once, shifting and taking form only when they are observed. This is not just a strange quirk of physics. It is a fundamental truth about the nature of reality. The foundation of this mystery lies in a simple yet astonishing experiment. An experiment that has been repeated countless times and has consistently produced results that defy common sense. A beam of particles, such as electrons or photons, is directed at a barrier with two slits. Beyond the barrier, a screen captures the particles that pass through. If the particles were simple, solid objects, one would expect them to pass through either one slit or the other, creating two distinct clusters on the screen. But that is not what happens. When no measurement is made, when no one observes which slit the particle passes through, the particles do something extraordinary. Instead of behaving like individual objects, they act as waves. They pass through both slits simultaneously, interfering with themselves and forming a complex pattern of light and dark bands on the screen. This pattern is known as an interference pattern, and it is the unmistakable signature of wave-like behavior. Yet the moment an observer attempts to determine which slit a particle passes through, everything changes. The interference pattern disappears. The particles stop behaving like waves and begin acting like individual objects. They pass through one slit or the other, as if they had always been definite particles. The mere act of measuring them forces them to choose a specific state. This raises a profound question. Before being observed, what was the particle? Was it a wave? Was it a particle? Or was it something else entirely? The evidence suggests that reality at the quantum level does not exist in a definite state until it is measured. It exists in a cloud of possibilities, a superposition of all potential states. Only when an observation is made does it collapse into a single reality. The implications of this discovery are staggering. It suggests that the physical world does not have an independent existence in the way it was once thought. Reality is not a fixed structure waiting to be uncovered. Instead, it is fluid, shaped by observation and interaction. This phenomenon, known as the measurement problem, has led to deep philosophical and scientific debates. What exactly causes the collapse of the wave function? Why does observation force particles to take on definite properties? Is consciousness involved in this process? Some interpretations suggest that measurement itself is simply an interaction between quantum systems, that any interaction, not necessarily a conscious observer, is enough to collapse the wave function. But others argue that consciousness plays a direct role, that awareness itself is a fundamental part of how reality unfolds. One of the greatest minds in history, Niels Bohr, once remarked that if quantum mechanics hasn't profoundly shocked you, you haven't understood it yet. The double-slit experiment is at the heart of this shock. It reveals that reality does not behave in the predictable, objective way it was once assumed to. Instead, it is influenced by observation, shaped by measurement, and bound by rules that defy conventional understanding. Superposition is one of the strangest consequences of quantum mechanics. It is the idea that a particle does not exist in a single state but in multiple states simultaneously. The best-known illustration of this is Schrödinger's cat, a thought experiment designed to expose the bizarre nature of quantum mechanics. In this scenario, a cat is placed inside a box with a radioactive atom, a Geiger counter, and a vial of poison. If the atom decays, the Geiger counter detects it, triggering the release of poison and killing the cat. If the atom does not decay, the cat remains alive. But here is where quantum mechanics introduces its strange logic. Until the box is opened and the cat is observed, it exists in both states at once, both alive and dead. The act of looking inside forces the cat to choose one state or the other. This is not just a hypothetical exercise. Quantum systems truly exist in multiple states until they are measured. Electrons, atoms, and even molecules have been experimentally confirmed to exist in superposition. Until an observation is made, their state remains undefined. The consequences of this extend far beyond laboratory experiments. If reality is not fixed until it is observed, then what is the true nature of existence? Is everything in a state of potential until it is perceived? And if consciousness plays a role in collapsing possibilities into reality, then what does that mean for the relationship between the observer and the observed? These questions are not easily answered. The more science probes into these mysteries, the more reality seems to slip through its fingers. One of the most astonishing consequences of quantum mechanics is the notion of quantum entanglement. When two particles become entangled, they remain linked no matter how far apart they are. A change in the state of one instantaneously affects the other, even if they are separated by vast cosmic distances. This suggests that information can be transmitted instantaneously, violating the classical assumption that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. This phenomenon has been tested repeatedly. Scientists have entangled particles and moved them miles apart. No matter how distant they are, their connection remains. A measurement performed on one instantly determines the state of the other. It is as if the universe itself is maintaining a hidden thread that links them beyond the constraints of time and space. Entanglement challenges the very nature of reality. If two objects can be connected beyond space and time, then what does this mean for the fundamental structure of the universe? Is everything in existence somehow linked at a deeper level? These discoveries are not just theoretical. They are being harnessed in cutting-edge technology. Quantum cryptography relies on entanglement to create unbreakable encryption. Quantum computing aims to exploit superposition to perform calculations at speeds unimaginable with classical computers. The bizarre nature of quantum mechanics is not merely a curiosity, it is reshaping the future of science and technology. Yet, perhaps the most unsettling implication of all is this. If observation is necessary for reality to take shape, then what role does consciousness play in the universe? Does the universe require observers to exist? Or is it that everything, including consciousness itself, is a product of a deeper underlying quantum field? These questions lead to an even more profound realization. If entanglement can link two particles across the cosmos, could it also link minds? Could human consciousness itself be entangled with the fabric of reality? This is where quantum mechanics begins to touch upon something even greater, a possible bridge between physics and the nature of awareness itself. It is a question that extends beyond laboratories and mathematical equations. It reaches into the heart of human experience, into the deepest mysteries of perception and existence. At the edge of what science can currently explain lies a tantalizing possibility, that the universe is not just a collection of separate objects but a deeply connected, living field of energy and information. The observer and the observed may not be distinct entities but aspects of a single, unified whole. And if that is true, then the next question becomes even more astonishing. If the universe is interconnected through invisible threads, could human consciousness be part of this vast web? Could the mind itself be entangled with something far greater than itself? Exploring this question leads to an even deeper mystery, one that challenges the boundaries between science and spirituality. The quantum connections seen at the microscopic level may be hinting at something far more profound, a universal consciousness that binds all things together. Entanglement, the invisible threads connecting everything. Two particles, once connected, remain connected no matter how far apart they are. A change in one instantly affects the other. It does not matter if they are separated by inches or by entire galaxies. Their link remains unbroken, as if some hidden force operates beyond space and time. This is not speculation. It is not a philosophical idea or a thought experiment. It is a scientific fact, tested and confirmed in laboratories across the world. Quantum entanglement is real. For centuries, science has operated under a fundamental assumption that objects are separate from one another, that physical things exist independently, only interacting through forces that can be measured. But entanglement challenges this notion at the deepest level. It suggests that reality is not built from isolated parts, but from interconnected relationships. It suggests that distance, as it is commonly understood, may be an illusion. This phenomenon was first predicted by quantum mechanics but was considered so strange, so impossible, that even Albert Einstein himself struggled to accept it. He called it spooky action at a distance, a phrase that captures the unsettling nature of what was being suggested. If entanglement was real, then two particles, no matter how far apart, could communicate instantaneously. This would seem to violate the fundamental laws of physics, specifically the speed of light as the ultimate speed limit. Yet, despite its strangeness, entanglement has been proven beyond any reasonable doubt. Experiments have confirmed it repeatedly. Particles are entangled, separated, and measured, and every time, without exception, the results show that a change in one instantly influences the other. Scientists have separated entangled particles by miles, even launching one into space while the other remains on Earth. The outcome remains the same. The connection between them is immediate, as if they are not truly separate entities at all. What causes this connection? No classical force can explain it. No signal is being sent between the two particles, at least not one that can be detected. The nature of this link remains one of the greatest mysteries in physics. There is no known mechanism that allows for such instantaneous communication. Every physical interaction takes time. A signal must travel. A force must propagate. Yet, entangled particles do not follow these rules. Their states remain linked in a way that transcends space itself. This has led some physicists to propose an extraordinary idea, that the universe is not truly composed of separate objects but is instead a deeply interconnected whole. What appears as separateness may only be an illusion, a surface-level effect of something much deeper. This realization changes everything. It suggests that reality is not a vast, empty space filled with individual things but a single, unified field of interconnected information. If this is true, then the implications extend far beyond physics. They reach into the very nature of consciousness, perception, and existence itself. If two particles can be linked across vast distances, then could larger systems, entire organisms, even human minds, also be entangled? Could consciousness itself be a product of this invisible web of connections? Some scientists have begun to explore this question. The idea that consciousness may be linked through quantum entanglement is still controversial, but there are reasons to take it seriously. The brain itself operates on a scale where quantum effects could play a role. Neural activity is driven by electrochemical signals, which involve quantum-level interactions. Some researchers believe that these interactions could create entangled states within the brain, linking thoughts and perceptions in ways not yet understood. But entanglement may not be limited to individual brains. There are cases, documented yet unexplained, where people report sudden, unexplainable knowledge of events happening to loved ones across great distances. Twins who feel each other's pain. A mother who senses the exact moment her child is in danger. These phenomena, often dismissed as coincidences, bear striking similarities to quantum entanglement. If entanglement applies not just to particles but to consciousness itself, then the implications are profound. It suggests that all minds may be connected at a fundamental level. It suggests that human beings are not isolated individuals but part of a larger, unified whole. This idea is not new. Throughout history, spiritual traditions have described a vast interconnected consciousness, a field of awareness that links all living beings. What was once considered mystical is now being explored through physics. The same principles that govern quantum systems may also govern the mind, pointing toward a reality where separation is merely an illusion. Non-locality, the concept that entangled particles influence each other instantaneously regardless of distance, challenges everything that classical physics once held true. It suggests that space itself is not what it appears to be. The very fabric of reality may be woven from hidden connections, stretching across the universe in ways that defy conventional understanding. Some physicists now propose that space and time themselves emerge from entanglement, that the universe, at its core, is not a collection of objects moving through a three-dimensional space but a vast, interconnected information network. If this is the case, then perception itself may be a limited view of a much greater reality. Human senses are tuned to experience the world in terms of separateness, this object versus that object, this moment versus the next. But beneath this layer of perception, everything may be connected in ways that the mind struggles to comprehend. This understanding challenges not just science, but human identity itself. The notion of a separate self, an individual existence isolated from others, may be an illusion. If entanglement applies at all levels of reality, then individuality itself may be nothing more than a temporary expression of a greater whole. In many ways, this echoes ancient teachings. Traditions across cultures have described an underlying unity that connects all things, an awareness that goes beyond the individual self. Quantum entanglement provides a scientific foundation for these insights, revealing that connection is not metaphorical but literal. This realization transforms the way reality is understood. It suggests that consciousness may not be confined to the brain but may be part of a field that extends beyond the body. It suggests that thoughts, emotions, and awareness itself may not be isolated occurrences, but expressions of a larger, interconnected network. It also raises profound questions about the nature of free will, the origins of thought, and the boundaries of identity. If all things are entangled, then where does one being end and another begin? If information can travel instantly across space, then what does this mean for time itself? Science is only beginning to uncover the answers to these questions. Yet, even in its early stages, the evidence points toward a reality far richer and more connected than previously imagined. At the deepest level, everything may be one. As research into quantum mechanics continues, one question remains at the forefront. If particles can be entangled, then could consciousness itself arise from the quantum field? Could awareness be an intrinsic part of reality, woven into the very fabric of existence? This question leads directly to the next frontier, the possibility that consciousness itself is not a product of the brain, but a fundamental feature of the universe. Consciousness as a quantum phenomenon. For centuries, consciousness has remained one of the greatest mysteries of human existence. Science has mapped the brain, studied neurons, and developed complex models of cognition. But one fundamental question remains unanswered: what exactly is consciousness? Thoughts arise, sensations are experienced, emotions come and go. But where does the awareness that observes all of this come from? The assumption has long been that the brain generates consciousness in the same way a computer processes information. But this view has serious problems. No known physical process explains how neural activity gives rise to subjective experience, the feeling of being aware, of having an inner world. This dilemma is known as the hard problem of consciousness. It is not simply a question of how the brain processes information or reacts to stimuli. It is a deeper question: why should any of this produce awareness at all? A machine can analyze data, store memory, and respond to inputs, but it does not experience anything. It does not have an inner life. So why do humans? Neuroscience can describe the mechanisms of perception, but it cannot explain the existence of the perceiver. It can measure the brain's activity, but it cannot pinpoint the source of the self, the one who experiences reality. This is where quantum mechanics enters the picture. Some of the greatest physicists of the 20th century suspected that the answer to consciousness might lie not in classical physics, but in the strange, counterintuitive world of quantum mechanics. Unlike classical objects, quantum systems do not behave in fixed, predictable ways. They exist in multiple states at once. They change based on observation, and they defy the assumption that reality is made of separate, independent parts. These characteristics have led some researchers to propose that consciousness itself might be a quantum phenomenon. That awareness is not a mere byproduct of neurons firing, but a fundamental property of the universe, woven into the very fabric of reality. One of the most well-known theories exploring this idea comes from physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. Their model, known as orchestra, orchestrated objective reduction, suggests that quantum processes within the brain play a direct role in generating consciousness. At the heart of their theory is the idea that consciousness arises from quantum computations occurring inside microtubules, tiny structures within brain cells. Unlike conventional neural processing, these quantum effects are thought to create entangled networks, allowing for experiences that cannot be explained through classical physics alone. The implications of this theory are profound. If true, it would mean that consciousness is not simply the result of chemical reactions but is rooted in the fundamental nature of reality itself. It would suggest that the mind is not a mere function of the brain but is instead linked to the deeper quantum structure of the universe. This aligns with the growing evidence that quantum effects play a role in biological systems. Birds navigate using quantum coherence. Photosynthesis operates with near-perfect efficiency due to quantum tunneling. If life at its most fundamental levels relies on quantum mechanics, then why would the brain be any different? This idea challenges the materialist view that consciousness is nothing more than a product of the brain's electrical activity. Instead, it suggests that awareness arises from something deeper, something that classical science has yet to fully understand. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence supporting this idea comes from experiments on the brain during altered states of consciousness. Studies on meditation, near-death experiences, and psychedelic states all point to the same possibility, that consciousness is not confined to the brain but can expand beyond it. In deep meditation, practitioners report a dissolution of self, a feeling of merging with a larger field of awareness. Brain scans of advanced meditators reveal unusual patterns of activity, as if normal neural processes are being bypassed or transcended. This suggests that consciousness may be accessing a deeper, non-local state, a state that resembles the behavior of quantum systems. Near-death experiences provide even more compelling evidence. Many people who have undergone cardiac arrest describe vivid, structured experiences despite having no measurable brain activity. They report floating above their bodies, seeing events in the room with extreme clarity, and even witnessing things that are later confirmed to have occurred in distant locations. These accounts defy conventional neuroscience. If the brain is inactive, then how can consciousness persist? If perception requires neural processing, then how can people describe verifiable details of events that happened while they were clinically dead? Some researchers believe the answer lies in quantum mechanics. If consciousness is not produced by the brain but instead exists as a fundamental property of the universe, then death may not be the end of awareness. The mind may simply transition from one state to another, much like a quantum system shifting between different forms. This idea is further supported by studies on psychedelics. Substances like psilocybin, DMT, and LSD have been shown to induce states of consciousness that defy normal perception. Users frequently report feelings of unity, timelessness, and direct awareness of an underlying intelligence permeating reality. What makes these experiences particularly intriguing is their consistency. People from different cultures, backgrounds, and belief systems describe nearly identical states of expanded consciousness. Many describe perceiving a vast interconnectedness, an awareness that their thoughts, emotions, and existence itself are part of a much larger whole. From a quantum perspective, this makes sense. If consciousness is entangled with the quantum field, then accessing these states may allow individuals to perceive reality in a way that is normally hidden. Instead of experiencing the world through the filter of the brain, they may be momentarily tapping into the deeper structure of existence itself. If this is true, then it changes everything. It means that consciousness is not an isolated phenomenon. It is not something that emerges from the complexity of the brain. Instead, it is fundamental, woven into the very structure of the universe. This perspective aligns with the insights of many of history's greatest thinkers. The idea that reality is deeply interconnected, that consciousness exists beyond the physical self, has been described for millennia. But now, for the first time, science is beginning to provide a framework that supports these ideas. Quantum mechanics suggests that reality is not made up of separate objects, but of deeply connected fields. Consciousness, rather than being an emergent property of matter, may be a fundamental aspect of these fields. If this is true, then it raises profound questions. What does it mean to be conscious? Where do thoughts come from? Are we truly separate beings? Or are we part of a single, unified awareness? If consciousness is not produced by the brain but instead exists as a quantum field, then it may extend beyond the limits of individual experience. It may persist beyond death. It may be accessible in altered states. And it may be the key to understanding the deepest mysteries of existence. This leads directly to one of the most radical ideas yet, that consciousness is not just connected to the universe, but is the universe itself. That at the most fundamental level, all awareness is part of a single, unified field. That the separation between self and other, between individual and cosmos, is an illusion. This is where science and spirituality begin to converge. The idea of a universal consciousness, an awareness that underlies all things, is not new. But for the first time, physics is providing a framework that supports it. And if this is true, then it means that consciousness is not something we possess. It is something we are. Next, we will explore this idea further. We will examine the growing evidence suggesting that consciousness is not merely connected to the quantum field, but is the quantum field. That our minds are not isolated islands, but expressions of a vast universal awareness. One that extends across space, time, and beyond. The universal consciousness hypothesis. Throughout history, mystics, philosophers, and spiritual seekers have spoken of a vast, interconnected consciousness that transcends the boundaries of individual identity. They have described moments of profound realization in which the illusion of separation dissolves, revealing a deeper truth, that all things are part of a singular, unified awareness. These experiences have been recorded in ancient texts, religious scriptures, and personal testimonies from people of every culture and era. For a long time, these accounts were considered subjective, impossible to verify through scientific methods. But in recent years, quantum field theory has begun to suggest that these experiences may not be mere hallucinations or cultural constructs. Instead, they may be glimpses into the true nature of reality, a reality in which consciousness is not confined to individual brains but is instead an intrinsic property of the universe itself. This idea, known as the universal consciousness hypothesis, challenges the conventional view that consciousness is a byproduct of brain activity. Instead, it suggests that consciousness is fundamental, woven into the very fabric of existence. The mind, rather than being a self-contained entity, may be a localized expression of a greater whole, like a wave on the surface of an infinite ocean. If true, this would explain why so many spiritual traditions emphasize unity, interconnection, and the dissolution of the ego as pathways to higher awareness. It would also provide a scientific basis for understanding mystical experiences, telepathic phenomena, and the sense of knowing that transcends ordinary perception. To understand how quantum field theory supports this idea, we must first reconsider what reality is made of. Classical physics assumes that the universe is composed of discrete objects, separate particles interacting in space and time. But quantum mechanics tells a different story. At the quantum level, particles are not distinct entities but excitations of underlying fields. These fields extend across all of space, meaning that everything in existence is part of a vast, interconnected web of energy. Even particles that seem separate are, in reality, manifestations of the same unified field. This directly parallels ancient descriptions of universal consciousness. Many spiritual traditions describe reality as a single, undivided whole, with individual beings appearing as temporary expressions of a greater unity. If quantum field theory is correct, this idea may not be metaphorical, it may be the literal nature of existence. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for this comes from quantum entanglement. As discussed earlier, entangled particles remain connected across vast distances, with changes to one instantaneously affecting the other. This phenomenon defies classical explanations and suggests that information, and perhaps even awareness, is not bound by the limitations of space and time. If consciousness operates according to the same principles, then it may not be confined to individual brains. Instead, it could exist as a field, a vast, non-local awareness that extends across the universe, connecting all things in ways we are only beginning to understand. This would explain why people who have never met can experience the same insights during deep meditation. It would explain why some individuals report feeling the emotions of others from thousands of miles away. It could even explain near-death experiences, in which individuals describe an overwhelming sense of merging with a boundless presence that feels more real than anything they have ever known. Recent research on altered states of consciousness supports this idea. Studies on psychedelic substances like DMT and psilocybin have revealed consistent patterns in user experiences. Individuals frequently describe encountering a universal intelligence, perceiving interwoven fields of energy, and feeling as if their personal identity has dissolved into a larger awareness. These reports are strikingly similar across cultures, belief systems, and personal backgrounds. This consistency suggests that such experiences are not mere hallucinations produced by random brain activity. Instead, they may represent genuine encounters with a deeper level of reality, one that is normally hidden from everyday perception. Some researchers believe that these states allow individuals to temporarily bypass the filtering mechanisms of the brain, which ordinarily restricts access to higher levels of consciousness. If true, this would mean that the brain does not generate consciousness but rather acts as a receiver, tuning into a field of awareness that exists independently of physical structures. This aligns with the work of neuroscientist Carl Pribram, who proposed that the brain functions like a holographic processor, interpreting information from a deeper, more fundamental layer of reality. According to this model, consciousness is not confined to the brain but exists as a wave-like phenomenon that extends beyond individual identity. If consciousness is indeed a universal field, then it would mean that every thought, emotion, and experience is not isolated but is part of a larger, interconnected whole. This would explain phenomena like telepathy, intuition, and the ability of individuals to sense distant events before they occur. It would also suggest that human beings are not separate from the universe but are active participants in its unfolding. From this perspective, the boundaries between self and other, between mind and matter, begin to dissolve. Consciousness is not something we possess, it is something we are. Each individual mind is like a drop in an infinite ocean, unique yet inseparable from the whole. This brings us to one of the most profound implications of the universal consciousness hypothesis, the idea that reality itself is shaped by awareness. If consciousness is fundamental, then it does not merely observe the universe. It participates in its creation. This aligns with the findings of quantum mechanics, which suggest that observation influences reality at the most fundamental levels. Experiments on the observer effect have demonstrated that the act of measurement collapses quantum superpositions, determining the state of a system. This raises a radical question: could consciousness itself be the force that brings reality into being? If so, then every thought, intention, and perception plays a role in shaping the world around us. This is an idea that has long been echoed in spiritual traditions, which teach that consciousness is the creative force behind existence. But now, science is beginning to provide a framework that supports it. This leads directly to another extraordinary possibility, the idea that consciousness extends beyond the physical world. If awareness is not confined to the brain, then it may persist beyond the death of the body. This could explain why so many near-death experiencers report a continued sense of existence after their physical functions have ceased. Some researchers believe that this points to a form of consciousness that exists outside of space and time, a field of awareness that is not bound by the limitations of the material world. If true, then it would mean that death is not the end but a transition, a shift in perception from one state of consciousness to another. This concept has been explored in depth by physicist Erwin Schrödinger, who argued that individual consciousness is an illusion and that the true nature of self is a singular awareness shared by all beings. His perspective aligns with many Eastern philosophies, which have long taught that personal identity is a temporary construct and that ultimate reality is a state of undivided unity. If the universal consciousness hypothesis is correct, then it may hold the key to understanding the nature of spiritual awakening. Many who undergo profound shifts in awareness describe an overwhelming realization that they are not separate from existence but are intimately connected to all things. This insight has been expressed by sages, mystics, and enlightened beings throughout history. And now, quantum physics is providing a possible explanation for why these experiences occur. If consciousness is truly a field that extends beyond individual minds, then moments of awakening may represent direct encounters with this fundamental truth. Next, we will explore how these insights relate to spiritual awakening. We will examine how altered states of consciousness, meditation, and near-death experiences provide glimpses into the quantum nature of reality. And we will consider the possibility that enlightenment itself is not a mystical concept but a direct perception of the true structure of the universe, one in which consciousness and existence are one and the same. Spiritual awakening as quantum recognition. Throughout human history, countless individuals have reported moments of profound realization, experiences that radically transformed their understanding of existence. These moments, often described as spiritual awakenings, transcend ordinary perception, revealing a reality that feels more vivid, more unified, and more meaningful than anything previously known. Some describe feeling as if they have awoken from a dream, as if everything they once believed about themselves and the world was an illusion. Others report an overwhelming sense of oneness, where the boundary between self and universe disappears entirely. Time loses its rigid structure, past and future dissolve, and only an eternal present remains. A deep sense of knowing arises, not intellectual knowledge, but an intuitive recognition of a truth that cannot be put into words. For centuries, these experiences have been considered mystical in nature, the domain of saints, sages, and spiritual seekers. But today, quantum physics is offering a strikingly similar picture of reality, one that suggests these awakenings may not be mere hallucinations or psychological phenomena, but glimpses into the actual structure of existence. To understand why, we must first reconsider what it means to be conscious. In the conventional view, consciousness is assumed to be a product of brain activity, emerging from complex networks of neurons. But as we have already explored, this view is being challenged by growing evidence that suggests consciousness may not be confined to the brain at all. If consciousness is indeed a fundamental property of the universe, an intrinsic aspect of the quantum field, then a spiritual awakening may represent a direct encounter with this deeper level of reality. Rather than being an altered state, it may be a return to the natural state of awareness, one that has simply been obscured by the limitations of ordinary perception. This idea aligns closely with the experiences reported by those who undergo profound spiritual transformations. Many describe the realization that their individual identity is an illusion, that they are not separate from the universe but are, in fact, an expression of it. This matches what quantum field theory tells us, that everything in existence arises from the same underlying field, that separateness is an illusion, and that all things are fundamentally interconnected. The implications of this are profound. If spiritual awakening represents a shift in perception that allows an individual to directly perceive the quantum nature of reality, then it means that these experiences are not supernatural. They are simply moments when the ordinary filters of human perception are lifted, revealing what has always been there. One of the most fascinating aspects of spiritual awakening is the experience of timelessness. Many who have undergone these awakenings describe a state where time ceases to exist, where past, present, and future collapse into a single, eternal now. This is precisely what quantum physics suggests about the nature of time. According to the Standard Model, time is not an absolute progression but a relative construct. At the quantum level, particles do not experience time in the way that macroscopic objects do. Events that seem to be separated by time at our level of perception are, in fact, part of a greater timeless reality. This aligns with the experiences of those who describe awakening to a state of pure presence. In this state, there is no sense of movement from past to future, only a recognition that time is an illusion, a construct created by the mind. Another key aspect of awakening is the dissolution of the ego. Those who experience it often describe losing their sense of individual self, as if the boundaries between I and everything else no longer exist. Instead of feeling like a separate being moving through the world, they experience themselves as the world itself, as the totality of existence expressing itself in a single point of awareness. Once again, this matches what quantum physics suggests. If consciousness is not confined to individual brains but is instead a field that permeates all of reality, then the sense of a separate self is an illusion created by the mind. The ego, in this view, is nothing more than a temporary structure, an interface that allows human beings to function in the physical world. But when this structure collapses, what remains is the fundamental awareness that has always been present, the consciousness that is not yours or mine but simply is. This explains why so many who experience spiritual awakening describe it as a return home, as if they have remembered something they had always known but somehow forgotten. They speak of an overwhelming sense of love, unity, and peace, an experience that cannot be explained through conventional psychology but makes perfect sense if consciousness is, in fact, the fundamental reality of the universe. One of the most intriguing connections between quantum physics and spiritual awakening is the experience of interconnectedness. Many who undergo this transformation report an overwhelming sense that everything in existence is deeply and intimately connected. They describe feeling as if they can perceive the invisible threads that bind all things together, as if the entire universe is a single living entity. This matches perfectly with what we know about quantum entanglement. If all particles in the universe are connected at a fundamental level, then the perception of separateness is indeed an illusion. At the deepest level, everything is part of a single, unified whole. If consciousness is also a field, then awakening to this interconnectedness may not be a subjective experience at all. It may be the direct recognition of an objective truth, a moment when an individual becomes aware of the reality that has always existed but was previously hidden. This idea is further supported by studies on meditation and altered states of consciousness. Neuroscientific research has shown that deep meditative states often result in changes in brain activity that correlate with experiences of unity, loss of ego, and timeless awareness. These states are associated with decreased activity in the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for maintaining the sense of a separate self. In other words, when the brain stops reinforcing the illusion of separateness, consciousness naturally shifts into a state that aligns with what quantum physics tells us about the universe. If all of this is true, then spiritual awakening is not a mystical phenomenon but a fundamental shift in perception, one that allows an individual to experience reality as it truly is. This raises an even more profound question. Can these states be accessed intentionally? If spiritual awakening is simply the recognition of the quantum nature of consciousness, then it may be possible to cultivate these experiences through specific practices. For centuries, meditation, breathwork, and certain psychedelic substances have been used to induce altered states of consciousness. Many who engage in these practices report experiences identical to those of spontaneous spiritual awakening, suggesting that these methods may serve as tools for accessing deeper levels of reality. But could there be more? Could science develop new technologies or techniques to reliably induce these states, allowing individuals to consciously perceive the quantum nature of their own awareness? Next, we will explore this possibility. We will examine cutting-edge research on meditation, consciousness studies, and the emerging field of quantum spirituality. We will look at experiments that suggest human consciousness may be able to interact with quantum systems, and we will consider what this means for the future of human evolution. If consciousness is indeed the fundamental reality of the universe, then learning to access and understand it may be the next great frontier, not just for science, but for the very nature of human experience itself. Practical applications and future horizons. The idea that consciousness and quantum physics are deeply connected is not just an abstract philosophical concept. It has real, tangible implications that could revolutionize our understanding of reality, human potential, and even technological advancements. If consciousness is indeed a quantum phenomenon, then learning to work with it intentionally may be the key to unlocking abilities that seem almost supernatural by today's standards. For centuries, various spiritual traditions have described practices that allow individuals to enter expanded states of awareness, states that align strikingly well with quantum principles. Meditation, breathwork, energy healing, and even certain forms of prayer have all been associated with experiences of unity, timelessness, and direct perception of the interconnectedness of all things. But beyond subjective reports, scientific research is now beginning to uncover evidence that these practices may have measurable effects, not just on the brain, but on the very fabric of reality itself. One of the most fascinating areas of research involves the relationship between meditation and quantum systems. Studies have shown that experienced meditators can influence random number generators, machines designed to produce completely unpredictable sequences of numbers. In controlled experiments, when meditators focus their intention on affecting the output, statistically significant deviations from randomness have been recorded. This suggests that consciousness may not be limited to passive observation. It may be an active force capable of influencing matter at the quantum level. Further supporting this idea, research into distant healing and intention-based experiments has yielded surprising results. Some studies indicate that when individuals focus their consciousness on another person, measurable physiological changes can occur, even when the individuals are separated by great distances. Heart rate variability, brain wave activity, and even immune responses have been observed to shift in ways that defy conventional explanations. If consciousness can exert an effect on quantum systems, and if human minds can influence each other across space, then it raises an extraordinary possibility that through specific practices, we may be able to train our minds to interact with reality at a fundamental level. This is where ancient wisdom and modern science begin to converge. For thousands of years, spiritual traditions have described states of consciousness in which practitioners gain seemingly impossible abilities, heightened intuition, spontaneous healing, even telepathic communication. While such claims have long been dismissed as superstition, quantum physics now provides a potential framework for understanding how these experiences might be real. If reality itself is a quantum field, and if consciousness is an integral part of that field, then it stands to reason that a sufficiently trained mind could learn to navigate and influence it in ways that science is only beginning to explore. This is not to suggest that every paranormal claim should be accepted without scrutiny, but it does mean that the rigid materialist view that consciousness is nothing more than a byproduct of brain chemistry may be an outdated and incomplete perspective. One of the most exciting frontiers in this field is the study of non-local consciousness, the idea that awareness is not confined to individual brains but is part of a larger, interconnected system. Experiments with near-death experiences, psychedelic states, and deep meditation all suggest that consciousness can extend beyond the limits of personal identity. Those who undergo such experiences often describe perceiving reality from an expanded vantage point, as if their awareness is no longer limited to a single body but is instead part of a vast, boundless field. Quantum physics supports this possibility through the principle of non-locality. If particles can be entangled across vast distances, instantly sharing information, then it stands to reason that consciousness, if it operates according to similar principles, could function in a non-local way as well. This might explain why so many spiritual traditions speak of enlightenment as a state in which one no longer identifies with the personal self but instead experiences awareness as universal. If consciousness truly is a field, then awakening may simply be the recognition of its true nature. But what does this mean for practical applications? If these ideas are more than just theoretical, then how can they be used to enhance human life? One of the most immediate applications involves healing. If consciousness has a direct influence on the body at the quantum level, then it may be possible to harness this effect to facilitate physical and emotional well-being. Many ancient healing practices, such as Reiki, Qigong, and energy work, are based on the idea that the body is not just a biological machine, but an energetic system that can be influenced by intention. While Western medicine has traditionally dismissed these practices, Studies now suggest that directed consciousness can have measurable effects on biological systems. For example, research into placebo effects has consistently shown that belief and expectation alone can trigger profound healing responses. If the mind can influence the body to this degree, then it is not unreasonable to propose that consciousness could also interact with the body's quantum structure in even deeper ways. Some researchers believe that future technologies may be developed to amplify this effect, creating devices that can interface directly with human consciousness to enhance healing and regeneration. This could lead to a new era of medicine, one where consciousness itself is recognized as a primary factor in health and longevity. Beyond healing, there is also growing interest in the idea that consciousness can influence probability and synchronicity. Some experiments suggest that individuals who practice certain mental techniques can increase the likelihood of desired events occurring in their lives. This aligns with anecdotal reports from those who engage in deep meditation or visualization practices. Many describe experiencing heightened synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem too improbable to be mere chance. Some believe that this effect arises because focused consciousness interacts with the quantum field, subtly shaping probabilities in ways that science is only beginning to understand. If this is true, then mastering consciousness could have profound implications not just for personal transformation, but for the future of human civilization itself. As we move further into the 21st century, research into these phenomena is gaining momentum. Some of the world's leading physicists, neuroscientists, and philosophers are beginning to take seriously the idea that consciousness is not an accidental byproduct of matter, but a fundamental force in its own right. If this is the case, then the next great scientific revolution may not be in outer space or artificial intelligence, but in the exploration of consciousness itself. In the coming years, we may see breakthroughs in technology that allow us to measure and interact with consciousness in ways that were once thought impossible. Already, devices that detect brain wave patterns are being used to create brain-computer interfaces, allowing people to control machines with their thoughts alone. Future advancements may take this even further, potentially developing systems that can enhance meditation, expand awareness, and even facilitate states of consciousness that align with quantum principles. But beyond technology, the most exciting possibility is that human beings themselves may begin to evolve in response to these discoveries. If consciousness is a quantum field, then learning to navigate it may be the next step in human development, an expansion of awareness that leads to entirely new ways of living, thinking, and interacting with the world. As we approach the final section of this journey, we will explore what this means for the bigger picture. If quantum consciousness is real, and if spiritual awakening represents a direct perception of this reality, then we may be standing on the threshold of a new paradigm, one that bridges the gap between science and spirituality, between reason and intuition, between the seen and the unseen. This is not just about personal enlightenment, it is about the transformation of human understanding itself. And as we move into this new era, one truth becomes increasingly clear. The universe is not something separate from us. We are not passive observers of reality. We are active participants in its creation.